It's about not being super prescriptive about we need to work with the biggest experts in urban biodiversity in this place. Actually, we want to work with the people who are the community experts in the place, who are the most connected to the people in that place, and will be able to support and create the opportunities to be part of nature and to be involved in it.
Around 80% of us across the UK live in towns or cities. Whilst the landscapes in these places vary enormously, the most densely populated areas are often those where the least green space is available. Following the publication of the People's Plan for Nature, which we learned about in Series 3 of the Carbon Copy podcast, RSPB, WWF-UK and the National Trust wanted to find new ways to support this urban majority and to recognise the importance of nature as it's experienced by most in shared gardens, local parks, allotments and other community spaces. This is All Nature from the Carbon Copy podcast. Episode 3, Nourishing Connections. Producer Brad and I arrived at the Granton Community Gardeners garden in North Edinburgh just as their weekly community meal was kicking off. We'd been expecting driving rain, but luckily the predictions were wrong and the lively green space was bathed in bright sunshine. The space is on a residential road, in a fairly built-up area of the city. It's quite large, maybe the size of an average primary school playground, and there are a few different areas: vegetable and herb beds, a wilder area towards the back with small trees, a polytunnel, a couple of sheds, and a space in the middle with tables and benches where a group of women were stood around cooking pots and containers full of food. The garden was filled with people, from tiny children to people in their 70s and 80s, and everything in between. We were meeting Tom Kirby, one of the founding members of the group, to hear how it all began.
We started just an informal group of neighbours digging up a street corner in this street, like the bottom of the road, and that was 2010. And then it spread kind of slowly through the neighbourhood. People came from other streets and were like, oh, we want a community garden, will you help us start one? So we did. Then we started eating together because that just felt like an obvious thing to do when we'd grown lots of food. And at some point we formed like a community group, and then we could get a bank account to get a bit of funding to get a shed and some tools. And later we became a charity, and we got regular funding to run community meals every week. Kind of the way the charity works is we have anyone from the area who comes to us with an idea or a proposal of what they want to do. If it contributes to the charitable aims, then we try and support it. That's how lots of other projects have started. So like we have the free shop. There's a local woman who kind of knows everyone's very good at helping people find what they need. Clothes, toys, household items, baby stuff, just trying to distribute it effectively to make sure everyone has what they need. And then we have a chicken cooperative, which is a dozen local families, households joint own a flock of hens, which live in the garden, but everyone in the co-op is on a rota to look after them and chip in for feed and get a share of the eggs. We've started Bread Club, which was a kind of ad hoc baking practice group. And after a while, a guy called Charlie came to that, who was a professional baker, and he ran it more like a workshop. And then out of that, the bakery started. We just bake lots of like really good bread. All the loaves are pay what you can, because we're not in the kind of area where you can like set up an artisan bakery that sells sourdough loaves for like £6 a pop. But yeah, we'd like to scale it right up so that we could supply as much of the bakery as we can with grain we grow ourselves. It's not fair if this area can only get ultra-processed supermarket bread.
Tom is very humble, but what the group has achieved here is really impressive. We spoke to several attendees for whom the weekly community meal and gardening group is something to look forward to every Wednesday, and which has helped them find new friendships and to connect with people they'd perhaps not meet in other circumstances. Juliet moved to Edinburgh from Oxford and says the gardening group has been a crucial way for her to connect with others in the local area.
I came along here because I stay nearby, and I loved it. The people here are so great. I mean, it sounds a cliche to say salt of the earth, but I say that with very, very deep appreciation and respect, because they are real people, you know, and they really do stuff that matters, and they don't expect praise. It's just fantastic.
Aidan is also a regular on a Wednesday.
Well, the free lunch certainly helps, but as well, it's really good for my brain to get out and to get my hands dirty and to move a little bit and have some daylight and sort of quite low stakes social interaction. It's just, you sort of build up a familiarity with people. It's like, because there's lots of people who come here every week. Yeah, everyone's just really like open and friendly. That's something as well that I really love about this space is how intergenerational and international it is as well. Yeah, there's people who come with their kids, there's retired older people, there's students, people about my age, and people who come from all sorts of places around the world who are in Edinburgh, who are local to this area now, and who come here as well to connect with one another and with community.
The delicious smells wafting over from the community meal are another clue to that cultural diversity that Aidan mentioned. I spoke to another of the project's co-founders, Mary, who is herself from Kenya, about the mix of nationalities and why this was such an important place for the community.
Now our Granton Community Gardeners, we have got so many nationalities. It's not on, we are over 15. It's amazing because people from Germany, France, Kenya, India, Afghanistan, Ukraine, where, Syria, we are all here. I wish each community where they are living, they could have something like that, so that when you come here, you eat fresh food, you engage yourself, your mind is relaxed, your well-being, mental issues, and you are not bored. And when you come here, sometimes you work. Even if you don't work, you come and sit and eat. So if every area where, like Muir House, Trinity, Edinburgh, wherever, they can have their own community engagement, so that people will not be able to feel afraid when you are going out in your area. You know 1, 2, 3, you know each people, they can say hi, we have been there together. So you feel you are at home and you go on with your own business.
The organisation here in Edinburgh has grown organically, pun intended, over the past nearly 15 years. We spoke to Rory Crawford from the National Trust to discuss how this project and others around the UK is being supported by the Nature Neighbourhoods programme.
I'm Rory Crawford. I am the manager of the Nature Neighbourhoods project, which is a partnership between RSPB, National Trust, WWF. It's funded by the National Lottery Community Fund and Co-op, and we are working with 18 community partners across the UK, including the wonderful Granton Community Gardeners, who we are visiting today. Community organisations are doing brilliant work at the community level in many of our towns and cities, and nature organisations are doing some excellent work at the national level, but there can often be a disconnect between those two parts of the sector. One bit which is perhaps higher capacity and works on big national policy issues, and another bit which is very much focused on the local and what matters within an individual place. We need to be able to work more meaningfully in towns and cities. We need more nature in towns and cities, and we just need to have it. That's where people will get that first spark if we're going to have any hope of solving the nature crisis. So without being too grandiose about it, I think that's why it's really important that big organisations work with smaller organisations. And when I say work with, I mean support, I mean help build capacity, I mean act in a way that supports the community rather than the way that we might think. You know, we're experts, we know what's best for you. That's not the way this project's constructed. It's all about hearing what a community needs and wants from nature in their place, and that's our starting point for it. So that's why we're working with anchor organisations in nature neighbourhoods like Granton Community Gardeners.
You're listening to the Carbon Copy podcast. We're all about inspiring more big thinking action for climate and nature by sharing the stories of brilliant people and organisations like Granton Community Gardeners who are already making a difference. If you're enjoying this episode of the pod, why not go back and listen to some of our earlier series and subscribe to hear new episodes as soon as they land. Although the Nature Neighbourhoods programme has come about as a result of wanting more people to connect with nature and wildlife, it felt very much like human connection and well-being was the primary benefit of this project. This was also the case at the other initiative we visited for this podcast, Lincoln Greeners, an urban gardening group run by community arts organisation Mawfa Theatre in Leeds. We'll hear from some of the participants of the group in a minute, but first let's hear from Rory about how the different community projects being supported by Nature Neighbourhoods were selected and whether it mattered that conservation and nature restoration were not the main focus for all of them.
We're talking about urban nature here, so these are organisations working in cities and towns in the neighbourhoods that need this the most. So if you look at the areas that are low income, they have not tended to get the sort of structural and high level of support needed to bring nature into places, and it's trying to address that imbalance, really. It's trying to actively look at organisations that are working meaningfully in those places and using that as our basis to go forward. I mean, a lot of efforts stall to do this type of work if you're not working with a grassroots organisation who's got credibility in the space, who've worked with residents who are based in the community. You know, if you parachute in as some other organisation and try and do that work, you'll be doubling up on work that organisation's already done. So why not empower and work with the organisation that's already there, rather than come in and want to have your logo and your name and your stamp all over it? Good that you mentioned Mawfa there in particular is a really good example, because nature conservation is a very, very white, undiverse sector, like second least diverse sector in the UK after farming. If we want to diversify the range of people who are going to be involved and feel involved and part of nature conservation, we've got a job to do, and we need to do active reaching out, and we need to be working with organisations that aren't just the usual suspects. And that infers working with organisations that might be an arts organisation, but they are working and serving with a community that might not be given the right opportunities to engage with nature conservation or, you know, community growing or whatever it is. So it's about not being super prescriptive about, we need to work with the, you know, the biggest experts in urban biodiversity in this place. Actually, we want to work with the people who are the community experts in the place, who are the most connected to the people in that place, and will be able to support and create the opportunities to be part of nature and to be involved in it.
So my name's Matilda. I'm project coordinator for Mawfa Theatre. I coordinate the Lincoln Greeners project, which is our gardening group. We're a community arts organisation working primarily with refugees and asylum seekers and settled communities around Lincoln Green. So it's very hyper-local. And it started with Cunlhenna Drama, which is a women's drama group. They meet weekly on a Thursday. There's a creche worker and mental health worker and, you know, people. That's become quite a beautiful, solid community. So that's been running since the beginning. And then after the pandemic, you know, people were saying that they don't really have a lot of access to green space. So it made sense for us to try and find a space here that we could use. So Lincoln Greeners is now the other activity that we run. So we start at 10:30. We have some hot drinks, there's tea and coffee, and generally everybody gets settled in. It's a 2-hour session. So in the first hour, we tend to be doing one kind of task together. Either it could be across both gardens, so the veg bed or the ornamental garden. So today, for example, we were doing lots of weeding, mulching. Some people were taking some cuttings. And then we tend to have a break at 11:30 and just come back together, look at what we've harvested, if we've done any harvesting in the first half of the session. And it's just a space to chat. Most people who come live alone or don't have much family here. It's just a space where people can come and socialise. And that could be the only form of contact people have in a day. So that break time is also important. And then during the second half, we'll just continue what we were doing, or do any watering, any tidying up, and then pack down. But it looks different every week. We also, as you saw today, we also have been making some herbal oils. So it's not only gardening. Sometimes we are preserving, or we have done some cooking. It's just food-related activities, from growing to eating, which is equally important.
Like in Edinburgh, it was wonderful to see such a diverse group of people connecting through gardening at Lincoln Greeners. Producer Brad asked Matilda about the people who attend the sessions and what she thinks they gain from them.
There's some people who are refugees or asylum seekers, and other people who, you know, might have settled status or just live around here and interested in gardening. We also have a lot of volunteers who, you know, might have heard of us through other charities. But yeah, it's really beautiful because not everybody speaks English as a first language, and some people's English language skills are limited. So the beauty of gardening is that we can connect through just like doing, you know, we don't necessarily need to be talking too much. We can explain things practically, but there's normally lots of giggles in the group because we don't understand each other, or we're like sign languaging. We're doing sign language with each other. If we've harvested something, people will say what it is in their language, and that's a really nice way of us sharing each other's kind of culture. Generally, people have told me that they just love being outside and like having a space where they don't need to really think they're kind of distracted from whatever else is going on in their life, and they can come here and just only think about the plants and only think about what we're doing here. So it's a bit of like a respite from daily life.
We've covered the mental health benefits of nature before on this podcast. Almost every one of the participants we spoke to, both in Leeds and Edinburgh, mentioned a benefit to their well-being from getting involved with community gardening. I wondered whether this was a conscious thing. Were people seeking a project to make them feel better? Or perhaps it was just a wonderful byproduct of getting their hands dirty and working with other people. Here's Lincoln Greeners volunteer Sam with her thoughts.
I was drawn to this place. I find it really therapeutic. And also, like, since I've grown up in such environment, I find myself that is really fundamental factor. Like, when I should surround myself, like I should surround with like natures and greeneries. I'm a bit introvert. Sometimes I don't want any interaction with people, but like here it's like they just let me do whatever I want to do, which is like a part of where like I think it's more important rather than communicating and get to know. Sometimes people need some place that you feel safe or comfortable. And materials other people allows me to do it. And if they if I want to chat or like if I want to involve, I can involve in. If I feel like, oh, I'm tired of like interacting, then I can just step out. They just respect my presence. I really appreciate or thankful for this place and people.
Edgar, another volunteer, says the project has helped him feel less isolated in the community.
It does keep me pretty busy, but it also helps me deal with depression and loneliness and stuff like that as well, you know. And for me, it helps me because I live by myself as well. So coming out into the community helps me integrate into the community as well, get to know the people around me, see how things are actually done and what's going on in the community. Because right now I feel part and parcel of the community.
Back in Edinburgh, Robert, another Wednesday night regular, said that he has discovered a new love for gardening through the group.
I've heard about it for quite a while, maybe 3 years, and it was at the back of my mind, and one day I made a point of coming across to find it. That was 2 years ago. I've more or less come every Wednesday since then. It's been an exciting time learning lots about gardening, which I never thought or didn't ever think that I was going to become a gardener in my old age, but it's actually so very interesting and the work is so relaxing.
I asked Rory about the support that Nature Neighbourhoods was providing and what had happened so far in the programme.
So everyone's got funding and support to be involved in the project, and that doesn't come with a big long list of strings attached and very difficult reporting. So there's financial support there for people's time to be part of the project. Each of the 18 organisations are going to create a neighbourhood plan for nature. They're going to co-design that with the people in that neighbourhood. So at the end of the project, there'll be 18 of these plans for each of these neighbourhoods. But most of the effort and the energy of the project is kind of the iceberg that's sitting beneath the water. If those plans are the tip, most of what the project is that big chunk that's sitting beneath the water. And that is creating the conditions that when that plan's created, it's a sort of seed that can be planted into fertile soil. i.e. most of the work is about building capacity. So that might be fundraising. So for many small community organisations, getting funds in the door is a challenge, and funds that are not super tied to one very small specific thing, but core support for the organisation, keeping them running. So we ran a bunch of fundraising training exercises to support people. Many of the organisations already do co-design. Some don't have formal training in it, so we offered a formal training programme in how to do co-design and how to run a collaborative process with people. We're now about to start a big chunk of work on local authority advocacies. Of course, you know, people rent land off local authorities. They might have to connect with a local authority on some policy or issue of rules or something else. And that's kind of their unit of change. If you want to see a big difference in a neighbourhood, it's often the local authority that local organisations will be dealing with.
As Rory mentioned, working with the local authority can be tricky for small community groups with limited time and networks. I wanted to know a bit more about Granton Community Gardeners' relationship with the council, and I asked Tom what the process was to get approval to get this project off the ground.
So it's all council land. All the street corners still are owned by the council. This site was council land, but we did an asset transfer for it. So it's now owned by the community, by the community gardening charity. At the time, there wasn't any system for how you get permission to use a bit of land, but we found a supportive council officer who wrote us a letter that said we kind of got the nod from the council to try it. So that's how it started. I think the council were wary that like we'd sort of start something and then leave it, and then it would be like a mess for them to clear up, right? Which is a fair enough thing for them to be concerned about. But then years on, we're kind of, the council appreciate, the council gardeners are always delighted to have less grass to cut and less hedges to cut.
It's certainly anything but a mess for the council to clean up. I suspect the initial hesitancy was one even shared by the gardeners themselves, who couldn't have known that the organisation would grow to the size and impact that it has today. I wanted to ask Tom if he was surprised by this and how he felt about his little project becoming his proper job.
Yeah, like it wasn't some big grand plan. It's just like, this feels like a good thing to be doing, and so we should keep doing it. I'm very glad about the way that loads of different people feel very at home in the garden. If we've managed to kind of host something in a way that lots of people from all different ages and backgrounds and so on can come and also feel like it's their space and they can host it for other people, then that's good. Every community needs a garden where like 60 people can come and eat lunch on a sunny day.
It certainly feels like the leaders of these two brilliant projects get as much out of their roles as the participants who come along do. Matilda told us about the value of this job in her life.
I work as a gardener, and sometimes it can be a little bit lonely. You know, it's a job where it's just really just you and the plant. And so it's really special being able to connect with people through the plants, share the knowledge that I've learned, but also just, you know, my family, I'm from Kenya, and it's just nice being able to talk about back home and just connect with my own heritage. Here, you know, there's just always so much joy and laughter in this garden that I always come away feeling nourished, which is really nice and feels really special in a job, but also really feels meaningful because this area is in need of green space. So being able to take care and create something like this just feels very like important and meaningful.
The Nature Neighbourhoods programme recognises that nature is for everyone. We are all part of nature, and even in the most urban and built-up parts of the UK, it's possible to find vibrant, beautiful and valuable green spaces like the two examples we've shared in this episode. Gardening and growing food are more than simply hobbies. They're vital means for diverse communities to come together and to reap the benefits of time spent outdoors, in nature, in the company of others. To learn more about Nature Neighbourhoods, Granton Community Gardeners, Mawfa Theatre's Lincoln Greeners Group, or other useful information about urban gardening and organisations that can provide support, check out the show notes. Thanks so much to all the guests we spoke to for this episode. The Carbon Copy podcast is written and presented by me, Isabel Sparrow. Our producer and editor is Bradley Ingham. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review or a rating, and please do share with everyone you can. Thanks for listening. Until next time, goodbye.